Hello everyone, welcome to the video. Please like and subscribe. Also, check out the author in the description. With that, let's begin. Chapter 14, Heroes vs. Metal Liberation Army. Third POV. Now, let it be said that Izuku isn't a petty bitch at all. Instead, it should be known that he is a major petty bitch. When Toga's clone finished in the meeting, Izuku just fell out of his chair laughing and clutching his stomach. They had slipped a bug to watch through on the clone, so they were playing the memories and recording them like normal. As such, they saw how Nezu asked if the Verdant organization would be willing to help them deal with the Metal Liberation Army. Izuku just couldn't hold it in anymore that the heroes were asking their enemy to help with dealing with such an issue. Just goes to show that society needs to be changed, since the heroes realize they are screwed if they don't get help with dealing with the Metal Liberation Army before All for One decides to get involved with everything. Izuku stated. The others could only shake their head at what they just learned, but nonetheless they would help. It of course didn't cost them anything to send a large army of clones of some of their advanced units and guards while keeping the real ones hidden away. As such, the Verdant didn't really have to waste resources except to plan things out. Twice, did I ever tell you how much I adore you? Because honestly, you alone keep this organization going so smoothly for me. I would have to be running myself to death to deal with a lot of issues if you weren't around, Izuku said as he leaned back and looked at Twice with a smile. Twice just hugged Izuku and thanked him. As such, they got busy making the plans for the battle that would happen. Izuku knew that a lot of heroes were likely to die in the fight, but he was not going to risk any of his people when he can send clones in to support. Twice has gotten better and is close to making clones of himself which would expand their abilities. However, as it stands, Twice can make a very decent number of clones before he faces quirk exhaustion, so they were not in any threat of having to use actual men and women of their military power. Several months passed, and now it was about 1 month before the summer break, and Izuku's spy network reported that they have successfully found the doctor's location. Izuku wasn't willing to go after the doctor right at this moment though, due to All for One still being around. They didn't know what quirks he had to just teleport the doctor back. As such, it became a waiting game for the downfall of the doctor. However, in other news, it was time for the battle between the heroes and Metal Liberation Army. Based on the bugs that followed Nezu around, Izuku was surprised he never found them, but oh well. The bugs were more or less actual bugs to begin with, so it's not surprising. Izuku gathered his guards and had the advanced teams on standby. The heroes were already on the move towards the Metal Liberation Army, and Izuku wanted a gate on standby and ready to open about 5 minutes away from the battle zone. The originals would be on site so more clones could easily be made, but the originals would not engage in combat. Izuku didn't want to allow personnel to get captured, since they had to be cautious of the heroes turning on them at any moment, since heroes like Endeavor would be on site. As such, the original would keep their distance to be able to retreat easily. As they were all standing on the hillside looking over the city, they could see it. They could see the massive number of heroes that were starting to surround the city. There were also a lot of ectoplasm clones around the place. Smart of them to get him to surround the city, to ensure no one escapes. They are a bit limited on physical combat, due to how much damage a basic clone can take without combining, but for scouting and border patrol it's perfect, Izuku stated as he watched the show. The Verdant had no plans to get directly involved in time soon. They would go in after the heroes suffered some losses, since why help prevent them from losing too much? That would be illogical, since the Verdant and heroes will be enemies in the future. Soon alarms went off around the entire city were going off, and the city was busting with life. Civilians were running towards the center of the place, while heroes of the city itself were already fighting the incoming heroes. The news had already broken as a leak happened that the government was putting down a large force of the Metal Liberation Army. As such, they could do nothing to act as if nothing was going on. And the low members that started to fight right away only confirmed the accusation. After about an hour into the fighting, Izuku authorized the entering of combat for the clones. As such, 6 advanced groups were cloned, and they had 30 groups with 5 groups from each advanced team. Then there were 5 clones of each Verdant guard except Twice. The guards would be operating near the other groups, but would also split off and deal with threats that needed to be dealt with. Izuku did notice that a large portion of the UA staff was on site. Izuku could see through the bugs that they had flying around that Eraserhead, Vlad King, All Might, Snipe, Ectoplasm, and Hound Dog were on site, while Nezu was in the far back planning with some other people. However, back to the battlefield. The heroes were losing ground in some portions of the battlefield, and the bugs in the command center were confirming as such from what they were hearing. Nezu's expression was tensed, but soon the Verdant forces arrived on site at each of these locations, and Izuku could see the expressions of everyone in the command center go to one of shock. Some of the officials were asking who these new people were, and Nezu filled them in. They are from Verdant. They are the ones that tipped us off to the Metal Liberation Army. It seems their forces have arrived and are hitting all the points that we are weakened in. This is good for us, since we were close to losing those fronts, Nezu stated. Some officials asked how Verdant knew about the weak points. Nezu responded. They have someone that can transform into people's appearances. Far as we know, they just have to see the appearance and can do it. So it wouldn't surprise me if we have a Verdant agent in this room with us, but don't waste time finding them. As it stands, they are not our enemy in this battle, and we need the help we can get since this operation was undervalued by the damn Hero Commission. They refused to give us enough heroes to do this operation as I really wanted to, Nezu said, and Izuku was in so much joy at him stating that. They would record that later on for the big show that they will put on later on when a prime moment happens. Now down in the operations itself on the battlefield, you could see All Might gritting his teeth as he was fighting Redestro. All Might didn't want to admit Tai, but he was actually being pushed back a bit since All Might was trying really hard not to waste one for all since he still had to deal with All for One. However, he soon received some help from the Verdant guards as Dabai, Mr. Compress, and Toga showed up in their outfits and started to attack the enemies around All Might, which gave him some space to breathe and focus on Redestro. Redestro himself was confused about who these new individuals were, and the guards could only smirk at his confusion. All Might pushed forward and started to push Redestro back, which only made Redestro stronger due to his quirk. Redestro, your quirk gives you more and more strength the more you feel stressed out. As such, the more All Might wins, the stronger you become, Dabai stated as he blasted some fire onto Redestro, causing him to scream in pain. All Might was glad for that information and soon figured a plan out. He would need to knock Redestro out in one punch. As the Verdant guards kept the pressure off All Might and did some attacks on Redestro, it provided a chance for All Might to end it as he came slamming down on Redestro, which caused enough shock in his body to make him black out. Though, there were some heroes that the Verdant did not help at all. These were heroes like Endeavor, who the Verdant just ignored and let him be attacked by a large number of Metal Liberation Army members. Dabai's clone that passed by just laughed in his mind at Endeavor's poor state with all the wounds. If things go as planned, the heroes will be weakened when it comes time to fight All for One, and it will be our time to make our debut to the world, Dabai thought as he kept his anger in check, even though it would be a good chance to kill Endeavor. That isn't why he was here, and he trusted Izuku's plans to work since they have come so far from the past. In the past, where he was just some random person on the street, and now he is the Verdant Guard of a 150,000 person organization since the group has only grown more and more in the previous months. Ironic. The heroes are so afraid of the Metal Liberation Army that they don't see the biggest threat, which is us, since we are soon to outpace their organization size of actual fighters. If All for One is gone, we have no direct threat outside of the government, since the 9th user won't be strong enough for a while to make us afraid, Dabai thought. Dabai went back to the fighting and kept his mind off Endeavor. Another hour or so had passed of the fighting, and all of Japan and the world were watching a fight. The media outlets under control of Verdant had started to talk about how the Verdant group, which was a rising vigilante group, had arrived on site about an hour into the siege to aid what appeared to be the weakening hero's side. This didn't go well for the Hero Commission, who were in outrage and were trying to get the media to correct their statements, but were denied as even the other outlets were picking the story and narrative up. This became an embarrassing moment for the Commission as it was going live and they couldn't control the narrative. Nezu, who had seen the broadcasts, was just laughing at the Commission and had muttered something on the lines of "You reap what you sow." Izuku himself was laughing as well and was so glad he had bought so many media outlets. God, the media outlets were such an amazing investment since they help us control the narrative, Izuku said as he laughed on the hill. The others were just chuckling as well. Soon, though, the battle came to an end and the heroes had suffered a massive amount of injured and a decent number of deaths on their side. They had captured what appears to be around 70% of the Metal Liberation Army, with about 81,000 members, with around 35,000 deaths being reported on the Metal Liberation Army side as the reports came in, but those numbers were still moving around. Heroes like Endeavor had received a decent amount of damage and would off the job for a while. A lot of the lower-ranked heroes that got assigned by the Commission ended up dead, while mid-rank ones received some nasty injuries. Even those from UA received damage, but not as bad as the other heroes, since Nezu had been forcing them to train almost non-stop and the ectoplasm clones really helped them out a lot. Overall, even though the operation was a success, it was a failure in the eyes of the injured, and the media made sure to point that out, that the heroes went in so underprepared. As everyone settled down and started to clean everything up, Izuku looked back at the bugs that were watching Nezu. Some Hero Commission people were trying to blame him for the failure of losing so many people and getting so many injured. Nezu could only grit his teeth and stay silent. He was the leader of the operation and had to do with the resources he had available to him, which was limited by the Commission, and now they were trying to shift the blame. Izuku wasn't having this as such. He made sure to have it all recorded later on for the big reveal. Nezu just had to accept it for now, but Izuku knew that Nezu was making plans to pay them back for this later on. A few days passed, and some outlets were talking about how the principal of UA failed the mission, but the outlets under Izuku's control did different narratives, and there were some differences between them. They talked about how the mission was successful in the objective but failed due to wounded and deaths, but they didn't directly blame Nezu. Instead, they promoted questions asking why the commission didn't provide more resources for such a large operation. Izuku had direct evidence that showed the commission purposely limited it but wasn't going to reveal that information yet. As such, the battle between the Meta Liberation Army and heroes came to an end with 0 wounded or dead on the Verdant side. Instead, they profited from this since they no longer had to deal with the Meta Liberation Army in their control area. And they happened to raid quite a few of their support department areas in their labs and stole a lot of support gear to supply their army with. Chapter 15, Prelude to Summer Break. 3RD POV. Izuku was currently sitting in his office preparing himself. Everything was here and it was time for everything to come to pass. Now you might be wondering what Izuku is talking about. Well, due to the bugs that were spying directly on Shigaraki and his small gang of members, the League of Villains were preparing themselves for an attack on UA. They wouldn't be directly attacking UA itself. No, they were aiming for the summer training camp that would be happening in a few weeks. How did they find this out, you might wonder? Well, it was a simple one from spying on Shigaraki, but also they were spying on the suspected mole and were able to confirm their theory of the individual being the mole. Izuku decided to not alert UA about the mole or the incoming attack. The council of his guards and the Lutens, which now included Stain, asked him why. Why? You all must remember we planned to overthrow the heroes and the government. Helping them out too much is not beneficial for us. Also, since they plan to attack the camp and kidnap a student to try and recruit them, which would damage UAS and Hero's reputation overall, it becomes a chance for us. I am wanting to announce our presence and goals to the world on the day All Might and All for One comes to blow. We will interfere in the battle and take All for One out using the temporary anti-quirk bullets. We will need to look for a good chance to do it, but there should be a moment where it will be beneficial for us. Also, I would like to capture all of the League at that moment if we can. As such, the moment the battle with the League versus Heroes starts, I want several squads going after the Doctor and ending him, then get any of the research you can before destroying everything else. Izuku stated, and they all nodded their heads at his orders. They asked what the overall plan for revealing themselves was going to be. Izuku looked over the numbers and information for his organization and thought for a few moments. As it stood, they had 500,000 members total. As it stood, 280,000 were combat ready while the others were all in non-combat roles and were not really fighters at all. So 56% of the organization was ready for combat. And they had 500,000 member count. Those that weren't in combat roles were either didn't want to fight, couldn't fight, or were deemed a higher priority for different needs in the organization, such as the scientists. The organization also controlled Shizuoka, Yamanashi, Nagano, Nagata, Toyama, Ishikawa, Fukui, Gifu, Aichi, Kyoto, Shiga, Mai, Nara, Wakayama, Osaka, and Hyogo. There were some holdouts in these areas, but for the most part, their organization controlled all crime in these areas, and crime rates had fallen sharply. As it stood, they controlled all of the crime in the entire middle portion of the nation without anyone knowing it. Though, Nezu has gotten suspension and has started to dig into these areas. It was one thing for several prefectures to drop in crime, but for so many to do it was not heard of, and there had to be a reason behind it. Though, the Hero Commission was showcasing it as the heroes doing amazing, which Izuku just laughed at. Izuku finished thinking and then spoke. We will show the nation and the world how the Verdant had helped, how the heroes had failed. I'm aiming to see All Might's true form shown to the world, and I plan to announce to the world the truth of his quirk without saying who has it currently. If Lemillion gets in my way, then I will tell everyone that he has it, which will make some rally to him, while others will aim for his head for the quirk and try to force it out of his hands. We will also expose Endeavor at this point to show the falsehood of the hero world. All Might's true form, his quirk, Endeavor, the Commission trying to make Nezu their fall guy, them purchasing Hawks as a child soldier, and so forth. I've gathered a lot of evidence on a large number of heroes that are dirty or have committed a lot of crimes that the Commission had covered up. Some include child porn, murder, abuse, and so forth. Izuku stated as he reclined in his chair as stopped speaking. They were all glad that it was close to the time for them to stop hiding in the shadows and to take more actions. Izuku wanted the teleportation technology done first in his dreams, but in reality, it wasn't going to be done soon. They were so close to stabilizing it. They could get it working for about 2 minutes before it broke down due to destabilizing. The permanent bullets to erase quirks were a failed experiment. No matter what they did, it didn't work. It was like they were missing an ingredient, and Izuku didn't know what it was, so he scrapped the research for that since those bullets would only be used on a limited number of people. The temporary ones would do their job, and they got the efficiency of them up to a week as well, so it didn't matter if they didn't have the permanent ones or not at this point. They also found that they did have a permanent version. It was done via pumping someone with enough of the anti-quirk fluids that it destroyed the quirk factor in the body. Now, you might wonder how they found this out. Well, let's say a newer member didn't read the rules and tried to lay his hands on a child that was the daughter of another member. Izuku went into a rage that day, and the man had volunteered himself to see what happens when someone has the fluids run through their body non-stop for an hour. They now then as the man was quirkless and showed no signs of a quirk again, and DNA showed no quirk factor present in the body. He was later killed after about a month. As Izuku was sitting there, he came out of his thoughts of the research. He decided at that moment that they would wage their offense in that day as well. We're also going offensive against the government that day. Targets will include the Hero Commission building, the president of the commission herself, Endeavor's agency, everyone's that is dirty on the list agencies if they directly own it. We will not reveal our hands on the number of troops we have or what areas we control. I want them to have to search for all of that, and we will slowly reveal ourselves in different places and take control publicly. This will demoralize them in the long run as we keep appearing and they can't do anything. It should also serve to get other areas under our control, as people should come under our banner, Izuku stated. They all agreed and soon got to work. Izuku sat there in his office and decided he was going to visit her. She deserved to know and not be caught off guard. As such, he called for his guards to come with him in their real form. They had the bug user also find her current location so they wouldn't have to search. As such, 5 hours later Izuku and his guards left clones of the guards at the base. Izuku didn't like making a clone of himself without him being near the clone. The reason for that is the memories didn't transfer between clones. So if the clone of Izuku changed something with the plans, then well, they were screwed. As such, Izuku didn't want a clone of him running around without him being nearby to hear everything and see it. He did use a clone every once in a while in the lab or to do paperwork with him in his office. But again, he had to be there to ensure nothing derailed that the clone thought of and he didn't know of. The others found it odd when he didn't want a clone made of him when they first started, but they understood when he explained it and they agreed quickly to it since the clones do operate on their own. Soon after moving around a bit, they snuck into the home of one Inko Midoriya before she arrived home from the store. The bug user was reporting her movements and anyone near the house as well. As such, Izuku and the Verdant guards just laid in wait in the apartment. She had stayed in the same apartment and Izuku wished she hadn't. He wished she would move on from him, but he knew that she got the hint in the letter and knew he was still alive. After waiting around 15 minutes, Izuku heard a sound from the front door. All of the members were in other rooms hiding and waiting. Soon, she entered and closed the door, and went into the kitchen. At that moment, Izuku opened his bedroom door where he was at. It was still filled with all of the All Might stuff, which made Izuku a bit sick of the room. He then walked down the hall while keeping his movements silent and sat at the table in the room. Inko still didn't hear anyone else in the room, but she tensed. She felt someone was watching her and she turned around and saw several people in her apartment with her wearing outfits that seemed familiar to her. Then she remembered what they were wearing. These outfits were the outfits for the Verdant members except the sole male who had a different outfit on. Why are you here? I know you are with Verdant, but I don't think I did anything to get your attention, so why are you here? Inko asked, a bit scared. Izuku looked at her as he looked around the room. He saw his guards around the room. Toga was near the door guarding it. Twice was near the window. Mr. Compress and Dabai stood on the other side of the couch behind Izuku since they wanted to give her some room to breathe. We're not here to harm you if that is what you think, Izuku stated, and at that moment Inko's eyes widened. That voice. Izuku? Inko asked with some tears in her eyes as Izuku removed his mask. Hello, mother, Izuku said with a slight smile, but she could see it one filled with sadness. I knew you were alive. Sweetie, I am so glad to see you, Inko said as she grabbed Izuku and hugged him. He only patted her back and moved them to the couch to sit down. Dabai and Mr. Compress moved to the other side behind them. They sat there for a few minutes before Izuku spoke up. I came to see you one more time. This will be it, mother. We can't see each other anymore and you will need to denounce me to the world when it comes knocking, Izuku said with a pained smile. Inko was confused. She had an idea that he was a part of the Verdant group but nothing else. What do you mean, sweetie? Inko asked, confused. Izuku sighed. Mother, I am the leader of the Verdant group. I founded it and I plan to make my move. When I do, I will become public enemy number 1. Soon Japan will be in chaos and I would rather you leave it in all honesty, Izuku stated. Inko was dumbstruck. Her son just told her that he was going to throw Japan into chaos and become public enemy number 1. She didn't know what to think. What are you going to do, Izuku? Inko asked and he shook his head. You can't know the details or the lie detector detective will be used to jam you up. Mom, will you please leave Japan? I can send you anywhere you want. If you stay, people will hound you for being my mother. They will see you as part of the creation of the chaos, Izuku said, and she thought it over but shook her head. I can't leave you here, Izuku. Even if the world turns on me, I will stay and watch you as you do whatever you're about to do. I will love you no matter what you do, my son, Inko stated as she planted a kiss on his forehead. They both knew what would happen to her. The moment someone that hated Izuku found her, She was going to die, and Izuku doubted it would be a simple and painless death either. He begged her one more time, but she shook her head. She knew her fate and she was fine with it. She would support her son to the end of it all. He did ask her to join the organization, but she said no. She was just a simple mother and she would go out like that. They spent more time just sitting there taking until it was time for him to leave. He needed to get back to the organization, and Enko said that Bakugo would be coming by soon when he gets out of UA in about an hour, since he's been coming over since Izuku disappeared. He's likely trying to ease his guilt. Izuku muttered, and Enko looked up at him and had an eyebrow raised. Izuku shook his head. He had a hand in me becoming this. I have a lot of hatred for him and haven't decided if I will kill him or not during my overthrow. All Might will be spared but Bakugo. He's changed, but does that outdo his sins is the question, and at this time I don't know. Izuku stated. Enko thought it over before she looked at him and spoke. Do you still care for his parents? She asked him, and Izuku nodded his head. He never could hate them for what their son did. They didn't know. They never got told. They were as blind as Enko was. I don't know what he did to you, but he has changed greatly. Whether it outlives his sins is a question for you to debate on. All that I ask of you is to think of them when the time comes of killing him or leaving him alive. Remember that when you kill someone, you are taking them away from someone else, so always remember that and try to keep the death to a minimum number as best as you can. That is all I can ask of you, Enko stated as she hugged him one more time and took in his smell and the feeling of his skin. This was likely the last time she would get to touch her son or see him this closely. Izuku could only nod his head, and soon they were gone. Enko sat there on the couch before putting the food away. She could only wait and see what the future would bring. Soon Bakugo arrived about an hour later, and she brought him in as she did every time he came. She knew she should hate him, but that was Izuku's position. That was his responsibility and the weight he decided to carry. She would not pass judgment until she knew everything, and even then she would do her best to keep calm. Her son was still alive, and that was the only thing that mattered to her. Chapter 16, Summer Camp. Third POV. A few more weeks passed, and the students of UA were now ending their first day at the summer camp. Izuku had the bug user spread some bugs out at the camp to keep an eye on everything that happened there. However, Izuku himself was super busy for the entire first day and also the second day as well. Now you might be wondering why. Well, simply they had finished the teleportation technology. They were able to get it to stabilize and work for long periods before they had to turn it off for the system to cool off and recharge. As such, the teleportation user wasn't being heavily relied upon, but he still was important. The teleportation gates themselves were fixed points, unlike the user himself, which could open the gate to another random point, but it took him a bit to open it without having a point on the other side already pre-made like they normally did. As such, he became more of a long-term battle teleporter where they knew they needed a portal at a certain time in a certain location, while the gates themselves were put up between the bases around the country. Izuku also ordered for a gate to be set up in different nations around the globe. These gates were hidden in a completely hidden location that was known only to the Verdant guards and Izuku. They would likely be staging points into other countries in the future, or a way for them to retreat in the future if they somehow lost in Japan and had to flee the country. As such, transportation between the bases became far easier, and more bases were planned for the future. They also had a self-destruction feature built into them that the Vanguard guards and Izuku could trigger if a base was compromised, so that the technology wasn't stolen from them. The bombs would wipe everything out in the room where the gate was at. Not even metal would survive easily, as the bombs were set to cause a large amount of heat and damage. So while they were waiting for the League to make their move and had all of their organization on standby, Izuku was finishing the last teleportation gates. Izuku was so happy to have these gates finished to think, it wasn't working because I carried a damn 1 in the math, which screwed everything up. Izuku thought as he smacked his head again, remembering that stupid error. Even a genius like him can make mistakes on complex technological advancements that no one else in human history has ever made. As Izuku finished setting the last device online and finished connecting all the bases up, a member of his organization came and telling him the League started their movements and the guards requested him in the meeting room. Izuku nodded his head and got to moving. Izuku arrived in the office to see Shigaraki on the wall projection telling his members to capture some of the UA students so they could turn them. The targets were Hitoshi Shinso and Fukikage Takoyami. The reasons they got chosen is likely due to their past, where they got bullied a lot due to their quirks. Shinso for his villainous quirk and Takoyami due to his dark nature quirk, which he also got bullied a bit due to how it appeared to be sourced in evil, but he didn't get it as bad as Shinso since his school stopped a lot of it, unlike Izuku's or Shinso's. As such, the two students would be primed to target and try to recruit, but Izuku doubted they would. Izuku decided to have a clone of Toga on standby near UA to go report it to Nezu that their camp was under attack. Izuku had said he wouldn't help the heroes, but he would still report it, since even if they did, it would be too late for them to stop it since it was in motion now. The moment Kurogiri opened a portal for their side, Izuku had Toga's clone go alert Nezu. Izuku also sent a few clones of Dabai and Mr. Compress to the camp. The reason you might wonder is due to the little kid at the camp who tended to go up to the mountainside, which was too damn close to where the villains were seen scouting the day before. So, Izuku had the clones waiting for the boy. In the event, someone from the villain group went after him for the sport, since there was a villain known as Muscular in their group that is actually the same person that killed the kid's parents. Izuku had ordered the clones that if Muscular was spotted, they were allowed to kill him freely if they had the chance to do it, since people like Muscular that enjoys killing for no reason but just to do it disgust Izuku. As such, that is how everything started. Toga's clone had arrived at UA at the same time as the League's members had arrived in the forest. Toga pressed the button on the gate and Nezu had let her in. She went the same route as last time and came to the meeting room, where she found all of the heroes minus Eraserhead and Vlad King, who were in the forest. They should really have sent people, but they did change the location several times before settling on the current location. Toga thought, "My leader wanted me to pass the information. We gained. The League had gathered their forces and we discovered they are attacking your camp as we speak. Your students are in danger," Toga stated as he broke apart and the heroes were stunned before Nezu tried calling Aizawa. The moment he did, Aizawa answered and was shouting, "Uneasy, you were under attack. The League just showed up a few minutes ago. Send," Eraserhead said as the line went dead as communications got jammed. Everyone was in shock, but they all soon broke out of it and started to make phone calls. All Might knew he couldn't do anything. He hated himself for using his time limit up. Instead, he called his detective friend and alerted him of the news they received and that they confirmed it. Soon heroes and police were in a mad dash to get to the camp, and anyone locally around the camp would arrive in 10 minutes, but that would be too late. As the Verdant was watching, they noticed that there were several members in the League's group that looked like knockoffs of Stain. "I thought all of them would be pushed away, but it seems they still managed to get a few members," Izuku said as he shook his head. Stain, who had joined them in the room, cursed in disgust. Then it happened. The clones they sent ended up in conflict as the villain known as Muscular had attempted to kill Koda. Izuku's blood boiled. He knew even he would end up killing innocent children likely in the war he was about to wage, but he wouldn't purposely aim for them. Soon the clones of his guards battled the villain known as Muscular, and one of them grabbed Koda and backed off to a safe distance. After a few minutes they got him pinned and Dabai ended him as a clone of Toga took Koda away so he wouldn't see it. The clones were a bit confused about what to do with Koda though. Even Izuku was confused on what to do with the kid, since they had no real intention of getting involved anymore in the battle. Soon though, the clones decided to protect the kid and take him down to the lodge. As they arrived, they were soon met with Eraserhead, who was battling it out with a villain who he finished off and knocked out. He saw the Verdant and was on guard but didn't attack. Then he saw Koda on one of their backs. "Eraserhead, we took care of one of the villains who was about to kill this kid. The villain's dead, since we have no mercy for those that purposely target children," Dabai stated behind his mask. Eraserhead thanked them and took Koda. "Also, they are targeting Hitoshi Shinzo and Fukikage Takoyami. They intend to recruit the two of them, but we're doubtful of that working, so you better find them before they get captured. We will be hiding around the lodge since our objective is to ensure the little kid and students don't get harmed. So go find your students in the forest, since they likely won't be receptive of us appearing when they are under attack by unknowns right now," Dabai stated as the Verdant guards ran into the forest behind the lodge area and hid. Eraserhead told Koda to go into the lodge and stay inside, but to inform Vlad King of the Verdant members guarding the lodge outside. Koda nodded his head and did that as Eraserhead watched him enter and then ran to authorize combat for his students so they could defend themselves. Soon, he found Mandalay, whose quirk could reach everyone. He told her to broadcast a message authorizing combat, and then also alerting everyone of the targets. She did it, and soon everything was heating up. It had been about 10 or so minutes since the fighting started, and other local heroes were arriving, which helped the situation. Soon the battle turned in their favor and the students were all saved. This, however, was still a hit on UAS and the hero's reputation in the eyes of the public. The school had been attacked once again, and nothing was being done to stop the League of Villains. As the fighting came to an end, Izuku decided to make the final battle between All Might and All for One happen. He decided to leak the location of the League's base to UA, but Izuku did discover that one of UAS students did place a tracker on the Namu, so he decided not to leak that location since they would already have it. It would also make it appear as their network wasn't as good as it truly was. Izuku also wanted to allow the heroes to sustain damage from the battle as well. He did, however, order for all of his members to leave the area if they happened to be in it. Izuku wishes he had control of that area, but he never dared to go anywhere near it until All for One was out of the picture. Soon a few days passed and the information had already been leaked to Nezu. The heroes were setting up a task force to launch a raid on the League. They had no idea where All for One would be located though. Endeavor, who had just been cleared for duty a few days after the camp attack, was sent to the Namu location since he could destroy the heads with fire, and All Might was sent to the bar location. Overall, they had as many heavy hitters as they could get, but they still had lost quite a few in the Meta Liberation attack, or the people were still injured in recovery. Izuku had 6 advanced teams with 2 copies of each person made sent to the doctor's location. Izuku had thought about sending just clones, but realized that there are quite a few Namus in the hidden location, so if the doctor used them, the clones would get wiped out. So Mr. Compress had about 12 clones of him there ready to take the Namus apart with his quirk, and the advanced teams and their clones would be focused on killing the doctor and stealing his research. There was no capture mission for the doctor at all. They also had several shots of the anti-quirk bullets ready to use on the doctor since they didn't know his quirk. They also would use them on the Namus to see the results on live Namus. Sitting around the location of All for One was several copies of Toga, who had become quite masterful in snipers. She had clones on very tall buildings a bit distance away from All for One's direct location. The reason for this is the sniper bullets are anti-quirk bullets. She would be waiting for Izuku's order to take the shot and take All for One out. They didn't know if one bullet would do the job or not, but from what they saw of All for One, he was using a medical mask to live, and he had to have quirks keeping him alive. If those went away, he would likely die almost straight away. As such, the stage for the final battle was set. Chapter 17, Camino Incident. 3RD POV. It was time the battle between All Might and All for One was starting. The Verdant had leaked the location of the League's bar location to the heroes, and the heroes already had the location of the initial Namu factory, though they didn't know about the Namus at the doctor's location though. Izuku had ordered the raid teams at the doctor's location to wait a bit before breaching for his location until the battle was in full swing, since if Izuku's guess was right, All for One or the doctor would need to send Namus from the doctor's location or a third location to help the League, since the heroes would likely take the Namus at the factor before All for One got involved in the fight. As such, it was a waiting game. Izuku had a massive amount of clones made of about 15 advanced teams that would be coming with him. The Verdant Guards would also be coming with Izuku as well, since it would be the declaration to the world that they were there and that they weren't going away. Overall, the objectives for the night were as followed. 1. The doctor's death. 2. Claim all of his research and Namus that they could. 3. Shigaraki and his League's deaths. 4. The capture of All for One or his death. 5. All Might true form is revealed. There are some more objectives to be completed, but the Verdant Guards had talked Izuku out of one of them. That objective was releasing the truth about One for All to the public. They asked Izuku to back off this point for now, since they believed it would be valuable information for them to hold on to for a better time, since it might just inspire people that there was a person capable of doing the same feats of All Might. Izuku thought about it and agreed with them, so they held off on it. There was also a new fact that made the Verdant even stronger. Izuku made a breakthrough and was able to convince Twice to make clones of himself, since the clones would be real regardless, and if he really wanted to know who was the real one, then he just had to make the clones disappear, since he had the ability to make them break. As such, they now had clones of Twice who could make clones of the teams and himself on the battlefield, which could make the battle change however they want. As it stood, they were all waiting in the hangar room currently with all the squads that would be going. Everyone else that was in the largest main base was also waiting there to see them off. Now you might be wondering why they were in a hangar. Well, can't have a military without military weapons, right? As such, with some of the money over the past months, Izuku has purchased military-grade aircraft and weapons, since he was in full intentions of taking the country over, so he needed some way to counter the military itself a bit. Anyway, that besides the point. They were all watching the projection of the heroes moving out and approaching the bar and Namu factory locations. Toga's clones with the snipers were long in place already, waiting for a few hours now, and the 6 advanced teams were waiting for the green light as well. The teleportation gate was prepared to be activated, which would open roughly a block or 2 away from the Namu factory, which Izuku believed would be completely clear due to the destruction that he calculated that would happen between the 2 titans. As the raid was about to begin, Izuku turned to everyone and had all their comms turned on to their agents out on the field for this operation. All of the other bases were also watching as well, and so were the workers at their companies that were completely under their control. Izuku looked at them all and spoke. Brothers, sisters, today is the day we make our voice heard in the world for the first official time. All times before now were just demonstrations of our powers to spread our name a bit in preparation for this. Today, though, we make Japan and the world know that we are here. When I took over the sections of the underworld that you all used to belong to, I put my foot down on crimes and ended it all. People thought I was crazy. He was going to run an organization with 0 crime. Yet here we stand, a fully self-sufficient organization with no petty crimes, no drug crimes, no murdering of random civilians. We are the Verdant, and I wanted us to be clean of our hands in the crimes, to set an example that it was society and the government that pushed most villains to that point, that no one is born evil but becomes it when they are pushed too far. when they are left with no other options. That this society that laws on discrimination against quirkless people like myself hasn't changed for 200 years. That this society that allows discrimination against those with the so-called weak or villainous quirks is wrong. That it must change. So I say this, hear my words, hear my will, for I am the Verdant Emperor and the time of the heroes is over. Izuku yelled at the top of his lungs and breathed in heavily when he was done as he looked at everyone. They were all wide-eyed and silent before it broke. Everyone was cheering and chanting, Verdant, Verdant, Verdant. They changed as it was time for the Verdant to rise to power over Japan. Soon, Izuku turned his head and saw the raid on the League was in full swing. Currently, Shigaraki was in custody, but Izuku doubted that would stay like that. He ordered the bug user to place a bug on each of them and ensure they went wherever they went. Just right after the bug control did it, the League got teleported, taking the bugs with them. Everyone was confused about where they went until the projection switched to the Namu factory and they saw the League with All For One. All For One had wiped out the heroes for the most part at the location and had decimated several blocks worths of building. The Verdant team looked and saw the absolute destruction via the bugs that were planted in the area. Some got killed, so the bug user had more move into the area to ensure they had full coverage. Izuku had the communications department activate the satellite over the area as well, so they had another source. They had taken control of all of the Metal Liberation Army satellites when they got defeated. They soon could see All For One just floating their eye in front of the downed heroes. Only a few heroes were still standing like Endeavor, but most of the others were just defeated. All For One then spoke. I must hand it to you, best genist. You were able to pull a lot of them out of the way just in time, but they still suffered a lot of damage. If they stayed, they would all be dead like the others that got caught in the blast. All For One stated. Best Genist tried to fight with Endeavor, but All For One easily handles them and wipes them out without effort. Endeavor was in disbelief at the power of the villain in front of him as he tried to stand once again, but was too injured to do anything. He could barely get his quirk to come on due to how badly injured and exhausted he was from living through those hits. Izuku checked in with the Toga clones and they were all alive and fine. Izuku had placed them far enough to not get hit in the destruction. As such, they still had every angle covered, and unless All For One hit underground, he was going to be screwed when it was time. Izuku saw at the other locations that new Namus had appeared. At that moment, he ordered the raid team to the doctor's location to get moving and to ensure he died. They also had some bugs at their location that went in beforehand and had grabbed onto him to ensure that if he escaped that they could track him down. They had coverage after all of the entire country, since they had clones of the bug user everywhere in multiple locations across the country and secured safe houses being guarded. As such, unless the doctor escaped to another country, he was trapped. Now back to the main event. As All Might had left the bar location, All For One used a quirk to forcibly open Kirigiri's quirk to create a warp gate to a new location. Good thing we have bugs on them, Izuku thought. He turned around. I want their new location, and I want 10 advanced teams going after them. Lethal force is authorized, but I would rather them captured so they can be turned over to the police. Izuku called out and 10 different advanced teams gather up their equipment and were prepared to leave. The teleportation user was prepared to open a gate, and the clone of the bug user was watching the League carefully and waiting for their trip via the portal. Soon the All Might arrived on site just as the League went through the warp gate. As we look around on the battlefield, we can see All Might noticing their escape, but he couldn't do anything about it due to All For One being in the way. Hello, All Might. Here to kill me again? All For One asked. Soon both of the Titans got into a large fight and were going head to head as they clashed, causing only more destruction. However, during the fight, Gran Torino got summoned right before All Might tried to land an attack, causing him damage. Soon the two Titans were arguing and All Might got pissed off and quickly landed a blow, breaking All For One's helmet, which exposed his scarred face and the fact that he lacked eyes. Get the portal ready. All Might has hit his limit and we will be getting involved, Izuku shouted. The gate based on projections will appear behind some rubble, which will be perfect since they won't know how they suddenly appeared. As such, after a few minutes, the portal was open and Izuku, his guards, and the 15 advanced squads that would be coming with him all went through the portal and appeared behind the rubble and waited for the perfect chance to make their appearance. And it made its appearance right then, and there is All For One powered up a large attack, and All Might was forced to block it due to the fact that civilians were in the path behind him. He either dodged and allowed them all to die, or he stayed and took it on. All Might chose to take it head on and blocked it. However, this cost All Might his form, which revealed it to the world, as All For One revealed the truth of Shigaraki being All Might's master grandson. Everyone was wondering if this was it, and it was at that precise moment before people could try to chant or anything that the Verdant struck. The Toga clones all took their shots and the bangs went a few seconds later, but it was too late for All For One to do anything even with his quirks, since the bullets came too fast and from multiple directions. He blocked 2 of the 6 shots, but all of the other shots landed and injected him with the drugs. Everyone was confused and shocked. All Might himself was confused until they all heard a slow clap that came from the side. The cameras turned to the sound and they all saw it. A massive group of people in green. The reporters soon spoke. It's Verdant. It's the group that has been known to appear during some of the recent crises and help people out. It's the Verdant, stated the reporter, which happened to be one owned by Izuku. This reporter was also the one with the main footage, since only their helicopter was in the air at that moment recording everything, so all of the other news outlets were going via their feed since their helicopters were still en route. It seems Verdant is here to save the day, the reporter stated. Soon this caused everyone to be cheering the Verdant name, and the heroes were tense at this. Even All Might didn't know what to think. He thought the Verdant group was going to their deaths against All for One until he noticed All for One on the ground. As people watched as the large group of Verdant members moved closer to All for One, they could hear the main person speak. Having trouble, All for One? Of course, that is a silly question, since that drug was made to counter you and cause you problems with your multiple quirks. I bet your body feels in horrible pain right now. Bring him to me, Izuku said behind his mask as a chair was pulled out of marble from Mr. Compress. Izuku just sat down and everyone was shocked at his calmness. Soon several clones of one of the advanced team dragged All for One before Izuku, and everyone was shocked. This was the man that just went blow for blow and overpowered All Might, yet he was helpless before the Verdant, and the news reported it as such. All Might walked a bit towards them in shock as he couldn't believe this. To think, the heroes have fallen so low. A symbol of peace couldn't defeat you, and so much damage was caused between the two battles you both had. It's quite pathetic after all. It only took one bullet from us to bring you to an end, All for One, and yet the almighty symbol of peace couldn't do it and had to cause so much destruction in his fight with you, Izuku stated as he shook his head. This had everyone questioning. Were the heroes really that ineffective? Then, more Verdant members appeared. This didn't shock anyone, but what they brought with them did shock them. It was the members of the League of Villains. Everyone was stunned. The heroes had let them escape, but the Verdant already captured them all. All for One was shocked as well, and even though he was having trouble breathing due to the lack of his quirks that were slowly killing him now, he looked up and asked how they defeated them so quickly. Everyone wanted to know as well. Izuku just laughed. It honestly wasn't that hard. I just planned around for different situations and made sure I had enough power to take you out in one go. You are a terrifying man that has lived for 200 years after all. I wasn't going to strike until I knew I could land the ending blow. Too bad that your successor recited my men. He died for it, though the other members of the League gave up. Also, if you are wondering about escaping later from prison, then you are wrong, since I already took care of the doctor who created those Namu creatures, by the way. Did you honestly think I wouldn't find him? Izuku stated with a joyful tone, and All for One was shocked. His plans were destroyed in a simple attack, even with my old bodyguard. He won't move unless called for, which will be impossible now, All for One thought. All for One knew he was done for. I surrender, All for One stated. This made everyone shocked and cheer. They were all chanting the Verdant name, and entire Japan was cheering their name. Soon police carefully came over and took All for One in the League away, and were very careful not to set the Verdant members off. Heroes were all down on the battlefield, as some Verdant members had long helped clear the rest of the civilians that could be easily found out. Endeavor himself was glaring at Izuku, and All Might was nearby as well. A camera crew that was owned by Izuku got close as well. The world was watching at the Verdant and heroes soon on separate sides. Everyone was tense and waiting for something to happen. Even the students and teachers back at the dorms were tense as they watched. Now, you might be wondering what is next. The symbol of peace is done, and has to retire now after all. That means Endeavor will become the next #1 hero, right? Izuku stated, and people everywhere just nodded their heads, and even the heroes and people on site nodded their heads. Endeavor had a smirk on his face until he heard the next words. Well, not so fast. You see, there is a huge problem that the Verdant is intended to resolve. You see, it's the Verdant belief that it's time for this society that is run by the heroes to come to an end. As such, this is the Verdant's official declaration of war against the heroes and the government of Japan, Izuku said as he stood up with his arms out wide. Everyone was shocked at his words. This made all of the heroes on site tense and get into combat positions. All Might tried to defuse the situation and step between them. Calm down. Surely we can end this without conflict. Why must you war us? All Might pleaded. He was scared. The heroes were in no shape to take on a massive war, and he felt he knew this individual in front of him from somewhere, but he couldn't place them. Why, you ask? Simple. This current society is corrupted. This society pushes people to become villains. This society allows blatant discrimination against those with the so-called weak quirks, villainous quirks, or those that have no quirks whatsoever. This society is run by corrupted heroes and officials. That is why. Can you honestly tell me, All Might, that this society doesn't deserve to be redone with new leadership? It's had 200 years to correct the issues, but it hasn't done it. Instead, it allows people like Endeavor to profit from it and rise to the top. Now he will be the #1 hero and lead the society, or have you be blinded by the fame and glory of being at the top for so long, All Might, that you don't see the issues that you clearly overlooked? Izuku asked All Might, and he was shocked. He didn't know what to say. Endeavor though spoke up. There are no issues. It's villain scum like you that caused the problems, Endeavor stated. And Izuku just laughed at this. It's people like us that causes the problems, you say. We were born from actions that people like you caused. It's time to start the show, Izuku said, and at that one of his guards removed his mask for everyone to see his face. Hello, Endeavor. Remember me? Dabai asked, and Endeavor said he had no idea who he was. Then Dabai took water and washed his hair out. He had let the dye from before clear out and only covered in a light material that could wash out. Endeavor went pale and everyone noticed his shock. Remember me now, father, Dabai stated. Verdant Guard Dabai, also known as Toya Todoroki, the firstborn of Endeavor, who attempted to kill Toya Todoroki off years ago after years of abuse from his father. Endeavor went on to abuse his wife and the other children, more importantly his youngest son Shoto Todoroki. This is the man that you have as the current #2. This is the man you have becoming the #1. An abuser, a murderer, a man full of sin that creates villains every single day he is alive due to his lack of care. He causes more damage and crime than he fixes. This is your hero's Japan, Izuku stated. As the news feeds got hacked with information about Endeavor, and then it went on to show things about other heroes and their crimes, everyone was stunned and disgusted. Look at the information on your screens. It shows countless heroes whose crimes get covered up by the Hero Commission since they want to keep power. The government knows about these crimes, yet they do nothing. Why? Because without villains there is no hero system. There is no money coming into them. No child soldiers that they can use as they see fit. Yes, child soldiers like the #3 Hero Hawks, who the Hero Commission bought at a young age and forced into a training program where they keep him on a leash to this day, Izuku said as more information appeared on their screens. All Might only got paler and paler at all of the information he saw. Have I been so blind to ignore all of this? Are we truly just causing more issues than we are fixing? All Might thought. He then felt he knew the boy in front of him more than he realized, but he still couldn't place it. Let's also look back at the raid on the Metal Liberation Army where my forces had to help the heroes out. Did you all know that the government purposely limited the number of heroes and resources that Principal Nezu of UA had? They wanted it to fail. They wanted them to fail because some of the people in the Hero Commission and government have ties to the Metal Liberation Army. The current government itself is one being controlled in the shadows already and is running on ideals that those born without an extremely powerful quirk don't deserve or rights. That means, if you even have a minor quirk that just bends your fingers to change your eye color, the government believes you don't deserve your rights, since they are nothing more than puppets, Izuku said as more information appeared about the president of the commission who had ties to the Metal Liberation Army, and some high-level officials in the government did as well. Everyone around Japan was in an uproar. Even nearby you could hear the chanting of Verdant going off as Izuku had placed clones of Toga in different disguises of their members around to start chanting, which only caught on as more information was exposed. All Might and the heroes near him could hear the chanting, and they got even tenser. This was not looking good at all for the heroes. Izuku only kept talking as he laid out what his group wanted to aim for. I envision a society that it doesn't matter what quirk you have. If you are capable of doing the job, then you should be considered for it. If you want to go to school, you shouldn't have to be in fear for your life. It's time for Japan to move away from the hero system. It's time for new leadership in our government. So those that are willing to rise up, take to the streets and demand the heroes and government to surrender, because this is the Verdant Declaration of War. We will not stop until we are all dead or arrested. We will not stop until we bring the change that the government and society have failed to do for the past 200 years. I am the Verdant Emperor, and the time of the heroes is over, Izuku yelled out at the camera. The cheering and chanting only got louder in the area around, and everyone viewing could hear it since it was so loud. Endeavor though believed that if the leader was taken out it would end all of this, so he launched at Izuku and everyone yelled for him to stop, but it was too late. Endeavor got close to Izuku and was prepared to burn him alive. However, Dabai got in front of him and grabbed Endeavor's hand, and just lit his quirk up as the other guards moved Izuku back away from the fight. Within a few moments Endeavor was overpowered. The support gear that Izuku made for Dabai was too strong and allowed him to go too far higher temperatures than Endeavor could withstand, and his body was burned heavily. He was still alive, but barely. Dabai tossed him back to the heroes and left him alive. Father, I won't kill you. Killing you means that you don't get to watch as my leader and I tear down your legacy. Tear down everything you wanted to achieve. I can also free the family and you will be left alone to rot, Dabai said with venom in his voice. Other heroes pulled Endeavor away and got him out of there. Everyone was in shock that the #2, even though most were disgusted with him, were still shocked. He got defeated so easily. This was just another display of the Verdant power. Izuku moved a bit forward and asked Dabai if he was okay, which he nodded. All Might moved forward and some were afraid for his safety. Even though the Verdant group was supported right now due to defeating All for One and exposing all the crimes, All Might was still loved, and them killing him would turn everyone against them. Please, Verdant Emperor, there must be some way to end this peacefully, All Might asked, and everyone listened into their talk. Izuku looked at him. Peacefully. You still live up to the name of the symbol of peace even now that you have run out of power, All Might. Though I wonder, how could this end peacefully? The government is corrupted and it needs to change. The hero system is corrupted and it needs to change as well. How do we peacefully end something with such corrupted systems in place, All Might? Izuku asked All Might, and he was silent. I don't know. However, there has to be some way that a less bloody path exists, All Might asked. Izuku thought about it and was silent. You know, All Might, you might be one of the few that could have a chance to break my will on this, but I can't stop. Not now, All Might, Izuku said as he removed his mask, revealing his face. All Might's eyes widened in shock. He remembered this boy in front of him. No, please, I am sorry, All Might stated, and everyone was in shock. What was All Might sorry for? Izuku walked up to All Might and everyone tensed. Izuku, though, shocked them all by hugging him. All Might's arms went around Izuku and hugged him, and he only apologized again and again. Please, I am sorry, All Might stated. It's all right, All Might. I long forgave you. However, I can't stop. Many people go without justice. Too many people are vilified for stupid reasons. Too many people are failed by the current corrupted government and society. It's time for it to change, Izuku stated as he pulled away and looked at All Might with a bright smile. All Might was broken down in tears as he kneeled at Izuku and gripped onto him. I destroyed you. I turned you into this, All Might stated. Everyone was wondering what happened between them. Izuku shook his head. You were only the straw that broke the camel's back. You were not the one that destroyed me. That goes to another person and the ones that helped him every single day of my life. That goes to society that looked down on me for being quirkless and tried to beat the life out of me every single day. This society treats quirkless people as a disease when it's not. I was able to gather a large army of people and reform them. I stopped them from committing crimes and harming people within a year, yet the government and society couldn't do it in 200 years. The time of heroes is over, All Might, Izuku said as he pulled All Might to his feet and hugged him one more time before returning to his side. All Might, either the heroes and the government surrenders so that new leadership can take over to lead this country to far more peaceful times, or they will be forced out through blood. We don't plan to go out silently. I hope they will surrender, but we both know they won't, Izuku stated, and everyone was watching was silent. This was the start of a war and it was going to be bloody. Everyone knew the government wouldn't hand power over easily. Izuku then turned to the cameras and spoke. People of Japan, I implore you, look at the current operations of this government and how society treats others. Is it really worth defending, or is it time for a new government to come into control and lead it? Verdant will not be silent anymore, and we will bring about the changes needed. Once we take control, we will change the laws to better serve the people, to better protect them, to bring an end to the heroes and bring criminal and law enforcement back to the police jurisdiction with better equipped police and better trained police to handle quirk conflict. Heroes have become only an entertainment industry with very few true heroes like All Might. Instead, we have people who are in it for fame and for money. People should not be incentivized to save. It's a responsibility that needs to return to the police, to the firefighters, to the EMTs. It's time for a change. So write up Japan and help us. Join US. We are Verdant and we are not going away, Izuku stated in the camera before walking away from them and looking at All Might. The cameras kept rolling even though the Hero Commission and government were trying to get them to stop. Izuku spoke to All Might one more time before leaving. All Might, tell Principal Nezu and the other heroes' schools to build dorms and turn into boarding schools. I will consider the schools as neutral grounds and will not authorize my men to attack them unless the hero schools are directly laughing operations from them or abusing the neutral grounds. Anyone without a provisional hero license will be safe unless they get involved in the fights. Those with provisional licenses and hero licenses will be open to attack when they are off campus or doing hero work. Do you understand? Izuku asked All Might, and he nodded his head. I'll inform the schools of this and thank you for not targeting the schools, All Might stated. Everyone heard this and was shocked at the offer that the Verdant Emperor had just given All Might and the hero schools. Soon, Izuku and the Verdant group left through the rumble, and the heroes didn't try to stop them. They still had to clear the rubble for anyone else that was hidden. This was the declaration of war that would go down in history. And with that, I'll see you all in the next part. Take care and bye-bye. P.S. I have a Discord in the description down below.